A few moments ago, Buckingham Palace announced the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II.
When, in December 2020, then BBC News anchor Huw Edwards received a WhatsApp message from the man who had started sending him legal explicit images depicting young men to be exact, asking if he wanted explicit underage images, Edwards, who had a wife, 3 sons and 2 daughters, replied, "Yes, kiss, kiss, kiss."
As he said, I'm so sorry to the children that were on those videos. It's out there now, all over the internet. Those children are still being viewed and watched for grubby little men like him. I'm sorry.
I should explain at this point that in order to avoid having this video age restricted, I have to disguise some of the words that I'll be using. That aside, after sharing the shocking facts to Edwards' case that emerged from his sentencing of the 16th of September 2024, I'll offer a discussion of them. On subsequently receiving and viewing child SHX images, Edwards fed back to his supplier, a young man called Alex Williams, whose own story I will soon share, that the images were, quote, amazing, unquote, and requested more. The supplier sent further and more severe images of abuse, including a video file of a Category A incident involving abuse of a boy aged between 13 and 15. I believe this image was labelled 13 years old. In line with what we've just learned of Edwards, Edwards would have known before viewing it that the content was illegal, and view it he promptly did. It is proven that Edwards later instructed his supplier not to send him underage images. This took place in February 2021. But it's also proven that when, after that, in August 2021, the supplier offered Edwards further indecent images of children regardless, Edwards replied, quote, go on, unquote. What Edwards then received was the second of 2 videos, moving images, depicting a boy, possibly as young as 7, being raped and or tortured. The prosecutor, Ian Hope, argued that Edwards remains a serious risk to children. There is no trace of the phone that Edwards used to communicate with his supplier. Police were unable to find it. In court, Edwards stated that, due to a neurological disorder of his, he couldn't remember viewing any indecent images of children. Mr Hope, prosecuting, said Edwards paid his supplier a total of £1,500 for the child SHX abuse images. But Edwards said that the £1,500 that he sent to his supplier wasn't for those images. Quick side note, it's a bit strange that Edwards can remember that despite his apparent memory loss inducing neurological disorder. End of side note, and a full discussion of all the points that I'm raising is coming soon, as I say. Alex Williams, the man who supplied Edwards with indecent images of children, first touted explicit images of adults to Edwards in 2018 via Instagram. Williams, aged 19 at this point, had reached out to other celebrities with the same offer. After making contact with Edwards, Williams was soon engaged in an online sexual relationship with him. The 2 men met in person on a single occasion. According to the evidence, Edwards was, during the period of his relationship with Williams, struggling with both his mental health and his sexual identity. Philip Evans KC, in fact, used this point in Edwards' defence, essentially arguing that Williams had taken advantage of Edwards' vulnerability. In March 2024, Williams was given a 12-month suspended sentence for possessing and distributing indecent images of children, all of which he had obtained from the dark web. It was the police investigation into Williams' offences that put them on the scent of Huw Edwards' own offending. The pre-sentencing psychological report on Edwards, undertaken by Michael Isaac, a consultant psychiatrist and neuropsychiatrist, attributes Edwards' sexual perversions to, quote, the restrictive, puritanical, but often hypocritical background of growing up in the particular cultural milieu of South Wales, with a father who was highly regarded and lauded outside the family, but was perceived as behaving monstrously within the family, unquote. This created, quote, an enduring cognitive dissonance and low self-esteem, unquote, which was, quote, compounded by a sense of being inferior, unquote, by not getting into Oxford University and going to Cardiff University instead, and, quote, being therefore something of an outsider at the BBC, unquote. Mr Isaac claimed that this, along with bouts of depression, quote, significantly and adversely affected, unquote, Edwards' decision-making. Mr Isaac says, additionally, that Edwards has a volatile mental disorder and is vulnerable to self-unaliving. Earning, by the time of his resignation, over £450,000 a year, Edwards, BBC News anchor of all of 2 decades, was the BBC's highest paid newsreader. He resigned in March 2024 at the age of 62. Now, these are just 2 reasons why his argument that not getting into Oxford is partly why, some 4 decades on, he took to requesting and gazing at images of children as young as 7 being raped and or tortured is absolute nonsense, in my opinion. It sounds like Edwards was abused in some way by his father, which, if so, is without question extremely sad. But given how long after his abuse, if any, from his father ended, Edwards' child SHEX abuse offences took place, this again is a stupid and false reason for his offending. Now that is my own ignorant opinion, but judging by evaluations from others of Edwards' perverted acts, I can say that it's an opinion that many others share. The Huw Edwards case dominated the news on the 16th and 17th of September 2024, this video having been recorded on the 17th of September 2024.
So we're just going live to Westminster Magistrates Court, where the former BBC presenter Huw Edwards is now leaving the building. He has been given a suspended 6-month sentence for child abuse image offences, meaning that he does avoid going to prison.
Disgraced former BBC News presenter Huw Edwards, as we all know now, was given a 6-month suspended prison sentence yesterday after admitting accessing indecent images of children as young as 7.
The Chief Magistrate said that the starting point is a sentence that goes from 26 weeks to 3 years custody. So how did Huw Edwards end up with a 6-month sentence suspended for 2 years?
The facts of the case are pretty well known.
We, of course, today, unless you've been living under a rock, Huw Edwards, disgraced BBC newsreader, sentenced yesterday to 6 months prison, suspended for 2 years, which basically means, long story short, if he commits any other crimes in the next 2 years, he'll be going straight into the slammer.
Normally, cases like this should and would go to the Crown Court. It didn't. It is incredibly serious. Yes, if anybody wants to know what he was looking at, do look up Category A on the Copine scale. It's drive time. I'm not going to say exactly what it was.
He's required to sign the Sex Offenders Register for 7 years and pay £3,128 in costs and a victim surcharge as well.
And he's been asked to repay the £200,000 salary he's received since his arrest, which he has so far refused, and he will also keep his £300,000 a year pension.
Even if there is a legally acceptable explanation, say, for Edwards' offending, there is, notwithstanding, no justification for it whatsoever. Edwards did what he did because he sadistically enjoys seeing children being raped and or tortured, things that he would do to a child himself if he could, I'd say, and felt, given who he was, that he was untouchable. The children in the images that he hungrily pulled over, meanwhile, who were doubtless battered, bullied and intimidated into appearing in those images, are most likely scarred for life. Some even speculate that some of those children may have since been unalived by their abusers, presumably to prevent them from talking. Did Edwards sexually USC his own children then? On that point, I'm under the impression that some of his victims, the children portrayed in his collection of child RN, were in fact abused by their own parents. What was Edwards feeling so vulnerable about in 2021 then? He didn't sound very vulnerable when, in the time around his commentary of the Duke of Edinburgh's funeral, April 2021, he tried to get a young producer, a man, into bed at his hotel. That just doesn't tally with the idea that Edwards was engaged in a struggle with his sexual identity, a vulnerability that was cited in his defence. The incident from January 2022, in which Edwards groped a 27-year-old male companion of his in the toilet at the Ivy, a high-end restaurant located in London's West End, again contradicts the idea of vulnerability on Edwards' part.
It's now been reported the disgraced former Beeb star allegedly sexually assaulted a 27-year-old man in the toilets of a posh club after sending him sordid text messages. It's alleged Edwards, 62, met up with a man behind his wife's back before groping him in a West End members club. The man, aged 27 at the time, told the Daily Mail, "One of the most shocking things was how brazenly aggressive he was. I think he got off on the fact that he was a powerful figure and that he could get away with grabbing me in the toilets like that." Before the meeting, Edwards allegedly bragged, You're getting assaulted in the Ivy. I'm so effing horny, it's indecent. Edwards, who pled guilty to accessing a litany of vile child sex abuse images this month, also said he felt, quote, very possessive about the 27-year-old, warning he would kill anyone who looked at him.
The ex-newsreader, in fact, has a lengthy history of making sexual advances in a notably open and brazen way towards his BBC colleagues and towards others, men and women alike, but mostly towards men, as I understand it. Edwards is too vulnerable for prison. He is minded for self-unaliving. This is what Mr. Isaac, psychiatrist, said, and Judge Goldspring, the judge of the sentencing, agreed that Edwards is too fragile to be sent to prison. As if Edwards is any sort of victim. The victims, for crying out loud, are the children in the SHX abuse images that Edwards masturbated to, and their interests alone are what Judge Goldspring should have considered in setting Edwards' sentence, in my opinion. Edwards is sorry. He recognises the repugnant and offensive nature of his actions. Judge Goldspring himself feels that the man's professed remorse is genuine. At his sentencing hearing of the 16th of September 2024, Edwards came in casual, cardigan, ordinary trousers, and with a small suitcase in tow. He wanted us to think that he thought that he would possibly be sent down, I reckon. Smart PR move that didn't fool anyone. Being aware, as he doubtless was, of the sentence handed to his former supplier of indecent images of children, he knew that he, whose own offence was lesser in the eyes of the law, couldn't be sent to prison. All chatty and casual and comfortable with his legal team on his way back out after the hearing, acting like he couldn't see the crowd, like he wasn't a disgusting, convicted you-know-what-a-file that everyone is sickened by. Contempt, contempt, contempt. Edwards is sorry, all right. Sorry that he was caught, that he now has a criminal record, and that his TV career is over. He has no sorrow or empathy whatsoever for his victims. Just my opinion, but again, I'm not on my own.
If one more person says to me indecent images, I'm going to implode. He's arrogant. Oh, I'm sure he denied it. Do you know, I go into prisons, I talk to paedophiles, I talk to sex offenders. I've never known one admit it. They all think they're entitled to doing it. I'm not seeing remorse. He's only sorry because he's got caught, isn't he? And, oh dear, he's not going to get a job. Well, he's got a £300,000 a year income of pension from the BBC.
As regards the 6-month suspended sentence that Edwards got from Judge Goldspring, Mr. Goldspring asserted that it wasn't in fact worth locking Edwards up because the cause of his offending wouldn't be addressed in prison. So everyone who is in prison is having the cause of their offending addressed, yes? Having the cause of one's offending addressed is the one and only criteria that ever determines whether a person is sent to prison, right? Ha! All other online you-know-what-a-files must be laughing at the law. In this country, furthermore, publishing, during a time of riot, a racist message that leads to nothing is considered a more serious crime than making child SHX abuse images. The sentence that Edwards received is in keeping with sentencing guidelines which judges are obligated to follow. Those guidelines clearly need changing so as to stipulate much harsher sentences for online child SHX abuse offences. This will effectively require the sentences for the offence of creating such images, which usually involves having physical control over a child, to be substantially harsher too. Just my opinion. In contradiction to the prosecution, Judge Goldspring said that Edwards presents not a serious risk to children, but a medium risk. So a medium risk is okay then, Judge. In contradiction again to the prosecution, Judge Goldspring deemed that the £1,500 that Edwards paid William was, as Edwards himself claimed, not for the child SHX abuse images. The money was simply a gift from one friend to another. Williams' phone, though, showed that, in response to a message of his to Edwards asking for, quote, a Christmas gift after all the hot videos, unquote, Edwards sent him £200 from some Nike Air Force One trainers. Now, what is that if not a payment for the images of child SHX abuse? If this video has gripped you, I recommend you to watch this one next. I'll meet you there.